All right, and hello and welcome to Ethics and the Analytics and the Duty of Care, the Module 2 discussion. It's Friday, October 22. I'm joined by Mark Corbett Wilson, who I guess is also eating lunch, so we could have had a super Andy Warhol video of two men eating food, which would have been a bit ridiculous. There may be people watching online on YouTube. We are streaming live on YouTube. We have another person in the waiting room, so Sharita is going to be joining us as well. Here we go. So we're at a course record 3 people in the chat. Yay. Tying our previous high mark. But again, like I say, there may be people watching in the course itself. We're broadcasting in the activity center. So, and if you're not sure what that looks like, here's what that looks like. This is for the video, people watching the video. If you just click on this, we'll see ourselves. This is so, but I'm not going to put that into the video because we'll get way too regressive here. But if you are watching in the activity center, I will be able to see your comments here. Also, if you're watching on YouTube and you want to make a comment via Twitter, just use the hashtag ethics21, and your comment will be visible to me again in the activity center. So welcome. So that was a week, and it wasn't the greatest week in my history of offering MOOCs. I'll say that right now. I nonetheless hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you weren't too distracted by the technical difficulties that I had through the week. So any first reactions to what you saw during the week? Mark?
I enjoy watching people struggle.
And I can't hear you. Is that because I need to be on earphones? It might be.
Perhaps. I think I'm all together, technically.
Try again?
Yeah, so I enjoy watching people struggle with technology. Let me say that again. I enjoy watching people struggle with technology. Because then, I don't feel so inadequate. And the way you allow people in to see, the dirty, greasy backroom part, I think is a big part of this connectedness MOOC. That being said, I tried to add some, we're not calling them applications anymore, and watch that evolve. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is actually very good. As I said, we is learning here.
We is learning, yeah. Sharita, any first reactions?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I felt I've done some teaching online, and I always felt that, to make it really perfect and, to edit it, make sure that everything was said right, etc., and you don't stumble over your words. A, I never had the time to do it perfectly. And B, that wasn't real. That's like watching Netflix.
Yeah.
So, I watched you do it and I went, oh, I was right to do it that way. So, I felt encouraged. And I also tried to think up some examples, for the descriptive. And actually, I just put in one for diagnostic. I found that interesting because I really had to think about it.
Yeah.
Like, was that really descriptive, or does that bleed into diagnostic? And I tried.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm finding similar conundrums. This is, of course, a living list. And each time I see something new now, I want to add it to this list. That's actually been the case for the last couple of years, but now I have it in Grasshopper. It's all a lot easier to do. So that's nice. But yeah, I mean, and even this morning, I'm sitting there thinking, well, do I want to divide that second category of diagnostic analytics into something like diagnostic analytics hyphen recognition and diagnostic analytics hyphen classification? And that seems like an open possibility to me, just to keep our lists a bit reasonable. But yeah, if I had it to do over again, I would use different terminology, or I would be way clearer about how I'm using the terminology that I am using, because uniformly people interpreted it differently than how I had intended it. And you notice I'm not saying that they misinterpreted it. That would be an incorrect statement to make. I'm going to turn on the live transcript. Enable auto transcription. There we go. And who can see this transcript should be everyone. So I don't know. Anyhow, I thought that would be cool. Yeah, so, and the way it's supposed to work, right, is by application. What I mean is use. So when I'm saying applications of analytics, I mean uses of analytics. And by link, what I meant was examples. And now I know it's still a link, but it's an example. So, and I'm just going to do something quickly in PowerPoint here to illustrate what I mean. And then again, this is for the sake of everyone else. See now, blank presentation, new blank slide. There we go. And now I'll share. See, new blank slide. There we go. Share. So now, are you seeing a blank slide that I've just drawn a little box on, or half drawn?
Not yet.
No.
No, I wonder what you're seeing instead.
Stephen Downs has started screen sharing.
There it is.
Good. Which screen? This screen. Good. Awesome. All right. So that took a little longer to set up than I would have liked, but go away. Stop giving me suggestions. All right. So basically, it should be like, I hate the way it defaults to having blue fill. So like this would be a category of analytics, like say diagnostic.
All we're seeing is 2 blank slides.
Really?
Yeah.
That's kind of weird.
Presentation 6 hyphen PowerPoint.
Yeah.
You're signed in. That's a different PowerPoint than you're looking at, I think.
No, that's what you should be seeing it. You should be seeing, but you're not seeing me type live on. Oh, there's a better tool for this. Okay. Yeah, and it's not even, I think I see what happened.
Oh, there it is.
Maybe.
There it is.
There it
Yeah,
is.
okay. Okay, yeah. So what happens is I have 2 screens going, and if I move it off the screen, then you can't see it anymore. So that's kind of weird. So there's the type diagnostic, right? And then an example of diagnostic analytics might have been, I'm just trying to think of one off the top of my head, and I can't remember any. Detect spam detection. Right. So that's one. So I'll just draw the little arrow here. Oh, man, it's really hard sometimes when insert. Where did it go?
I think it's a shape.
Yeah, I can't find shapes.
It's there,
There they are.
left side.
Yeah, so annoying. Okay, like that. That's better.
Right.
And then there's an example of spam detection, which is Aximet, say. Right. So we'll draw another arrow like that, right? So what's intended, so the spam detection, that's the application. Aximet, that's the link or the example, and there would be an HTTP whatever there. And that's what I was expecting you guys to put in. So you would put in an application like spam detection and then categorize it, diagnostic, descriptive, whatever. And then later you would put in a link or an example like Aximet and then categorize it as an instance of spam detection. That was the plan. The plan was very badly executed. Okay, how do I stop sharing now? Oh, there we go. It was covered up. So that plan was very badly executed, but you guys did pretty well interpreting it. And certainly the stuff that you put in was pretty good. So, but yeah, you know, a little lesson in usability and terminology there for me, but that's fine. You know, I mean, it is a learning experience, and if I'm not learning during this course, then so. So I'm going to go back to sharing again briefly.
So my takeaway there is we could have done that on Monday.
Yeah,
that
little
exercise right there. If we'd done that on Monday, you know, then the week would have been different. Not better, but different.
Yeah. And absolutely, that's what I should have had there in the Monday video or in our conversation or something.
Yeah.
My problem is I was still writing some of the scripts on Monday. So I knew I wanted to do this, but I wasn't sure it would work. And then it should have been really simple, but then I bogged down into some horrible script errors. And that's what threw me off track. But so anyhow, where's my browser? Where is my browser? Yeah, here we go. I'm going to share this one. So, okay, you should be seeing the activity center again, but I'm going to go back to the home page. So here's the way it should have worked. And I also redid the module pages to make this a bit easier as well. So here's our module, which is module 2, applications of learning analytics. And here's the task that I gave you. Right. So add application. See, and like horrible, right? But here you would type something like spam detection or any of these things, right? Then you'd put it in one of these categories and you'd write a short description. And the idea was that when you submitted that, well, then basically we're done. It would ask you also to put it in a module, but that was just a test. The second part, to find a link, add link. So here's the link, and you'd put in the link title, URL, etc. And then it would, once you submitted, oh, go back, okay. So I'm just gonna give you some fake links here. I'll remove this later. But once you submitted, then you would add the application, whatever it is. Now, in a good world, the whole list of applications would display here, but they didn't. So you'd actually have to type the name of the application. For example, spam detection. And then update. So, and then you go see that page. And here's spam detection, right? And so, guess if email is spam. Gee, I thought I had a better description than that. We may have actually had some duplicate submissions. I'm not sure. Anyhow, here's the bad link that I just put in. And so the idea is that we have all of the applications of analytics. So here are the categories that were predefined. Each one of these is an individual application. So spam detection should be in here somewhere. There it is. It might be the only one. It might indeed be the only one. And then, yeah, and then you can just click on any of them. And then you see the examples down here. And then I've added the suggested here, which takes you back there. That's how it was supposed to work. So, yeah, it would have been great if all of that had been done ahead of time. But we're going to do something very similar for the next module as well. So the tools will be the same. The terminology, I'll make it a lot clearer at the start on Monday. So thoughts, comments?
Would Ad Blocker Plus be a diagnostic?
I would say yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah. So now the way I would actually do that, right, is I would say that ad blocking is the general application, right?
Okay.
So I'd create application and I'd categorize it as diagnostic.
Okay.
And then ad blocker plus is an example
Is
of
an
that.
example. Okay.
Right. And so I would create that as a link and then associate it with ad blocking as the general category.
Okay.
It's kind of a different way of thinking. You know, I mean, the way I'm looking at this, it sort of is forcing you to abstract a bit from specific applications and to think of the kind of application in general, and then even abstracting a bit from the kinds of applications to the different categories of applications. The categorization is purely arbitrary. And I was thinking about that as well. And we could actually, if we thought it was useful, come up with a completely different categorization for these applications instead of diagnostic and descriptive, etc. I don't know, call them classifying and recognition and prediction. Well, I guess that's still a category, but you know what I mean.
So in looking at these various categories of applications, my mind kind of looks at it, at least in some of them, is first you describe, then you diagnose, then you predict. Like, is there some kind of progression there? Because
that's, yeah.
if I'm going to then begin to think about, well, what
Mhm.
is a predictive application, etc., then to me it's got to be a little bit different than just classifying things or
Yeah,
adding labels. It's got to be another step.
yeah. I borrowed this categorization system from a scheme that Gartner used,
You mentioned,
the consulting company. Yeah.
okay.
And when they depict it as this series of stages of an analytical process. I added two more because I felt that their description was incomplete, and I think the examples that I've given prove it. But nonetheless, that's kind of the way of thinking that the original scheme had. I'm not sure though. I mean, yeah, you have to describe stuff in order to diagnose, and you kind of have to diagnose stuff in order to do predictions. But there, in module whatever, when we look at artificial intelligence systems generally, sometimes these systems skip steps and go,
Yeah,
for example, straight to diagnostics or
yeah,
straight to prediction. And so that's why, maybe an alternative categorization of these examples into like classification, recognition, regression, etc., according to the different types of AI that even we outlined at the beginning of this module, might be a better way to do it. I don't know. And, in a certain sense, it doesn't matter, but in a broader sense, it kind of does matter, because, we're trying to think of the ethics. And so the ethics is going to be a path through the application to the general type of analytics being used, to the sorts of questions that people answer when they're building such systems. So, yeah.
It's just a way that I realized that I began thinking about it that way. And I realized too that that's kind of simplistic, and that, you're right, certain applications will jump, right?
Yeah.
Or they'll be both. Or,
Yeah.
it's not an either or, it's not binary, it's not necessarily linear, but that's how
Yeah.
I first grab onto an idea. I try to, fit it someplace. So.
And I'm sure that was the intent of Gartner when they came out with that system of categorization, was to give people a tool that allows them to access the different types of analytics, but as a story they can tell themselves. Which makes sense and has some kind of linear flow, which is, it is in many ways an easier way to grasp the concept. But it's also a bit artificial.
Yeah.
As long as we recognize that, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
So I wanted to, well, first of all, mention that spam detection was on the list twice for some reason. So
Okay.
Might have a loop that you didn't intend there.
Well, yeah, what's happening there? I have an easy answer for that. These forms that I made, where you enter in either the application or the link, are a total kludge. I just threw together some script quickly, and that's why I ran into such problems. Because Grasshopper isn't really intended to just get form-based input from people. But I don't have the proper mechanism available, but I wanted people's input, so I made some forms. And these forms did not check for duplicates. So when somebody typed in spam detection as an application, it did not respond by saying, oh, but spam detection already exists, and it should have. And real Grasshopper does that, but Quick Kludgy Submit script doesn't. It also doesn't do some other things I won't talk about. But I had a horrible time with that because, trying to make a simple Kludgy script dovetail in with a large complex application can be tricky. But yeah.
Anyway, so I did notice that. And
Yeah.
so now I'm wondering, and I guess this is too difficult, at this time, but if we were using a program that had artificial intelligence built in,
Yep.
you should be able to just sort of throw these things over the wall and let the machine
Categorize.
categorize them, suggest groups, and let categorize emerge and sort of pick up a folksonomy or something. But apparently we're not there yet.
No, and see, and to me, and I think this is an interesting thing. To me, there's two ways of looking at this kind of problem. The one way is what you just described, having the machine look at this input, and it would be links or plain text input or whatever, and then do our categorization for us. But the other way of looking at it is to think of us, the three of us, or if we have other people in the course, the however many of us, as the learning system, and to draw these associations ourselves. And this needs to be done at some point anyways, maybe, for the purpose of training artificial intelligences in the future. I'm not saying that our work here will ever be used for such a purpose. I have no such plans. But, it's to me interesting to ask, what are the difference between how we would do this and how the machines would do this? This course, the design of this course is a process of building up that sort of graph as though we were an AI system trying to come to grips with this subject. Now it's hampered a bit by technical difficulties, but I think as a pedagogical approach, there's something to recommend it. I'm hoping anyways. So, and I want to show you what I have in mind. If I can find it quickly here, here we go. Yeah, right. So now we're
So this points to a human network as a potential artificial intelligence.
Yes. And as itself an artificial intelligence, and secondly, as a mechanism for training artificial intelligence. And if you think about it, that is how we train artificial intelligence. When we get to that module, I think it's module number 6 or something like that, when we look at it, we'll see that all of these things that we do as humans are in fact what we use to train artificial intelligences. And so it is probably a good idea as a society to do that maybe a little bit more intentionally, which is the purpose of this course. Let me show you now how this is intended to work further on into the course, and keeping in mind I'm still working on this and I have the help of Matthias Melcher on this. So here now, this is Matthias's system. Here's what we've been building in the module 1. So here's descriptive analytics, diagnostic analytics. Here are the lists of applications. I'm hoping you're seeing the screen right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then here are some of the examples. The list of examples is longer now. And so by using Alt and then drag, which is not what I see the instruction here. I always forget. We can actually draw relations. So what is Spam Assassin? Well, Spam Assassin is a type of spam detection. What is spam detection? Well, spam detection is a type of diagnostic analytics. And then Topic Explorer, what is that? Well, that's a kind of, well, you see, I didn't have, I've actually later added it, a good application. Robot article, and so on. Sometimes if we do this, we can see pretty quickly the inadequacies of the system. But the idea is that we can draw these relationships for ourselves. So this mechanism exists and is tied directly to the course database. And we could actually see these representations for things like modules and pages and such, but I haven't been using that. But as a tool now, I want to be able to do stuff. Whoops, this is what happens when you don't use Alt, right? Descriptive, systems analysis, descriptive, etc. So I want each person to look at this and build part of a graph. And then there is a way of exporting it, but again, it's not obvious or easy. But then to just click submit or whatever. And then what you've drawn here would be added to the graph of the course to help build out the relations between these things, so that when we go back to the course screen, we look at the list of applications and all of that, the results of that change how we present the display, how we understand the subject. So we're doing the simple version now, which is just simple classification. But I have in mind an exercise for next module where we look at some issues that have been raised, and we look at some of these application areas, not the specific examples, but the application areas or uses, and draw lines between them. Does this application area raise that issue? Right. And so, and that would be interesting. And again, I wish I had 100 people join that graph because that would be pretty cool. Because, and then that would also give me weighted connections between these different instances, right? Because like, 50 people might say that spam detection raises the ethical issue of monitoring email. One person might say that spam detection raises the ethical issue of fairness to commercial media or whatever. And so that weighting would be a way of allowing me to modify that graph, just in the way an artificial intelligence system would modify those weights. So my intention is to do that, even if we have 3 people doing that, because why not? The whole point here is to try this and see what the result is, because again, it forces us as participants in this to think about what the relations between these things are, what kind of uses or applications are problematic, really problematic, and what ones maybe aren't so much so. And it gives us some more insight. Then in module 4, we look at ethical codes, and we're going to have a little fun with that. Again, each of these codes will be an item in the database, and we'll be able to draw lines between, does this ethical code address this issue? And clearly, we won't be able to do a complete graph of that, but still thinking about that, thinking of the codes in these ways, first of all, it forces us to recognize, I think, not all codes cover all issues, and maybe they shouldn't, but maybe some codes don't cover important issues. or whatever. I don't know what we'll discover when we graph this,
Mhm.
which is why it's interesting. So that's what I have in mind. What are your thoughts?
Well, so my first question is, do these connections or edges have labels?
No. Well, they have an identifier in the database, but they don't have labels specific. I do have the capacity of adding labels to them.
See, I think that would be helpful because then you could generate views based
on the labeling.
on the labels, right, as well as the objects.
Yeah.
Notes. So that's my first question.
Hmm.
And then I was thinking while you were talking that the way we're using AI now in the corporate manner is, of course, closed. And so they're harvesting all this data, which is public in theory, right? And then processing it in the closed manner. And what you're pointing to here is an open system that could be regulated and monitored and could be politically driven in the good sense. And so that's a model I would like to see discussed. I mean, we're starting it here, but that's not a discussion I've ever seen in academia or in good governance type circles.
No, and it's the sort of discussion you don't get to, in my view, until you look at this subject from a very broad perspective, the broad perspective that we're taking here. I have exactly one message for module 2 that I want people to learn if they learn anything. Of course, people should learn whatever, but the thing that I would say is the most important thing is that there are many applications of artificial intelligence, far more applications than the small number of them that gets discussed in the research and the media, talking about analytics in general, and especially talking about analytics in learning and teaching and learning. People talk about analytics for learning path recommendation or analytics for predicting if someone's going to fail the course, and that's almost all they talk about. But there are so many other applications, some of which are good, some of which are not good, some of which raise issues, some of which don't raise issues. And that's what I want people to see. There's this wide range of applications.
We're doing stand-up shows.
Sorry about that. I'm going to drop a link in here. So my new worst use case, I guess. I'm going to drop this in the chat. I'll annotate it in a second. Is this?
YouTube.
Yeah, it's a YouTube. It's a comedian that's become a journalist, and he's just kicking everybody's butt. And he's not that funny, but he's doing good journalism. I didn't know him as a comedian, so I just know him as a YouTube talking head.
Robot dogs with weapons, yeah.
Yeah, so this is my new thing. It's like, so they come out with first there was the dancing robot on 2 legs.
Yeah.
And then there was the quadruped, which they label a dog. And now they're strapping weapons on them, right?
Yeah.
And this is artificial intelligence applied.
Absolutely.
in a way that just a year ago I wouldn't have imagined.
Yeah. And it's funny, we don't think of this as educational technology, but you could imagine a robot dog with, say, instead of like a weapon, something like an electric zapper, patrolling the halls in a school. And if the student is in the hall without a pass, zap, instant punishment, right? Now, the 3 of us probably would consider, I think quite rightly, something like that as abhorrent or repugnant. But if I can think of it, so can someone who doesn't think that way. So, I can easily see this kind of technology being misapplied.
Well, every previous technology has been misapplied, so it's a pretty safe bet this one will
Yeah.
be too.
Yeah, why would this be any different? Exactly.
Yeah, we're always looking for that perfect technology,
Yeah.
but you can go back as far as you want.
Yep.
You know, my favorite is language and, in my case, religion.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
talk about a misapplication of the technology.
Well, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, for thousands of years. So every technology, unfortunately, has that. I wish I'd have realized that before I went to work in Silicon Valley. But
Yeah, well, live and learn. The thing is, too, though, right, is we need to have a story here. It's easy to say this application is wrong, but I've just postulated the existence of a person who would think that this is a perfectly appropriate way of making sure unauthorized people don't walk around in school hallways. And they might raise scenarios like school shootings or whatever to justify.
Yeah, it's for the
position.
children.
It's for the children. Won't somebody think of the children?
Exactly.
Right? So what is the story here that tells us, no, this is an unethical application of analytics and AI in schools? And, that's where it gets complicated because, we can't simply appeal to the intuition. We just know it's wrong because this person thinks it's right.
Mhm.
We can't simply point to a rule or a code of conduct because there aren't rules. And the codes of conduct, and most codes of conduct are silent on the question of arming robots.
Mhm.
Some aren't, but most are. And it pretty much doesn't come up in educational codes of conduct because I think people haven't thought of it. So, and even if it's in a code, what would the basis for that code be? What would the basis, if we're not using ethical code-based practices, what would the basis for the practice be? This is where it all gets messy and complex, but interesting. But what we want, I think, coming out the other side of this is an actual story, a way of determining yes or no, is arming robot dogs in schools wrong? But first of all, you have to have the application. You have to understand that it's an application. Yeah, you have to understand it might have some benefits. There are reasons why people would want to arm robot dogs in schools. And then you have to identify the issues that might be raised, wrongly punishing children, accidental death, things like that. Again, what precisely is wrong with, what precisely are the issues that are raised? And that's why I want to draw these lines. Because none of us individually, I think, can come up with this. I mean, they can come up with this, but it won't be nearly the same quality, even of three of us coming up with this.
Yeah.
Let alone the thousands of people I expected in this MOOC. No, I wasn't, just kidding. I wasn't expecting thousands of people. But, maybe in some future MOOC taught by a Stanford professor who replicates this kind of MOOC as graph, not that that would ever happen.
It will.
Then you could have a MOOC with thousands of people drawing these connections, and you'd get this picture of what that particular group anyways thought about it. And maybe we can more widely think of applying this in society as a whole, but that's looking way down the line.
Right. I would say that right now, the way it goes is somebody thinks that something is a nifty idea, and they don't really think about all the collateral that happens. And they write the scripts for the algorithms, and that just gets shoved in this black box that very few people can understand. Right. And then it pops out the other end. And because maybe that person is a celebrity or, a Stanford prof, if their name or whatever is behind it, well, then you think it is ethical because you suppose that that
Yeah.
person is non-biased, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So even with all of that, it's hard for, the general public or for all of this stuff to be generalized.
Absolutely. I think you're totally right about that. And, I mean, the big, I think the core question of this course is how do you address that?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, because that goes back to the story. I mean, complexity theory tells us that when you build that black box, you can't possibly know what the outcomes are.
Yeah.
You can't. But
Yeah.
yet we put a face on it and sell it,
yeah,
as a cuddly, warm, fuzzy thing because, of the Stanford prof or the cartoon character, whatever. And we never stop and say, I mean, there should be a big disclaimer at the top of all this is,
yeah,
no, we can't possibly know the outcomes and we better keep a close eye on it.
Mhm. But even what does keeping a close eye on it look like? Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I think
Yeah.
we should be building these graphs, certainly as exercises like this, so that we have something like a baseline against which to assess these AI black boxes. Because
And that takes
otherwise,
us back to the concept of open.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
If anybody can take a look inside the box
Mhm.
and then publish an opinion,
Yeah.
however informed about, look, this is what's going on in there, they can at least theoretically draw attention to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And even if we can't see all of the details, we see what went into it. In theory, you can actually take the graph and run it through an analyzer and see what's being associated with what, although most people won't do that. But you can see the discussion as it happens. We're doing, indeed I'm doing as an educator, all kinds of work that is shaping what this network would look like the naming of these categories, for example, even the fact that I call them applications instead of uses, which was a mistake, but now I know it was a mistake. And I could easily imagine, an AI system, just, some professors building something like this. It's all going to be automated. They use whatever labels they think are appropriate, and that's what the system bases it on. And maybe it makes category errors and nobody can ever detect it because it's deep down in the innards somewhere. So yeah,
sounds like a project for the Department of Defense, because we really need defense against this stuff.
yeah.
I'm not worried about China. They don't have a big Navy. I'm not worried about them in California. I'm worried about Facebook.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. The second MOOC that I'm doing is in February, March, and I am doing this because I'm already committed. Is on data literacy, and in my shop, the Department of Defense in Canada's Canadian Armed Forces, DND, Department of National Defense, because we tend not to go global. Never mind. Is very interested in this, and I've been working with them on defining data analytics, and we did some survey work last year. And they're continuing their survey work, but I and some other people said, well, look, your understanding of data literacy needs to be refined considerably before you try to teach people what data literacy is and how to use it. And so that's what that's the impetus behind this second MOOC, but I'm going to be using the same method. And maybe I'll get more people, maybe I won't, but nonetheless, working at it this way, working at it openly this way, I think will produce better results. He says, hopefully. And then that'll inform the Department of National Defense, and presumably anyone else who's interested, because, I don't want to keep any of us a secret.
Yeah.
So we're less than 10 minutes from the top of the hour.
Yeah.
Do you want to wrap us up, Stephen, on this week and preview next week or not?
Yeah, sure. Because we actually might have an audience, but also for you guys too, I guess, because you're. So yeah, and let me say thank you for being such dedicated course attendees. Because although I have and would teach this to no people, it really is better having people, so that I'm not actually teaching, I'm discussing and thinking aloud and doing all of that kind of work, which really makes this fun. So to the wrap up, basically, well, this is the wrap up. Where'd it go? Let's get the right screen on here. Yeah.
And it would be helpful for us to continue to submit.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Yeah, keep submitting stuff. I know there's a deadline on that, but ignore that deadline. I'm not going to turn the stuff off.
Yeah.
I'm watching it closely just to make sure I don't get spam and stuff. If I do get spam, I have an idea that will slow the spammers down, but right now we're benefiting from obscurity.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, let's see.
That's my defense system.
Yeah.
Security.
So, but this here, what we're looking at now, this is the unit or the module. This is the subject, the major categories: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, generative, and deontic analytics. We didn't even talk about deontic analytics at all. I will have a video coming out about that, hopefully sometime by the end of the day. So it'll come out in the newsletter for today, but if not, then certainly next Monday. This category, I think, is really interesting because it almost comes back to what it does come back to what we were talking about, right? Analytics themselves being used to determine what is right, what is wrong, what is fair, what is just. We can imagine things like AI judges, although that's kind of a classification problem. But imagine we had analytics that did not just interpret the law, but wrote the law.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually, that's actually, well, yeah, changing the law. There we go. That is a category of analytics. We might think that this is far-fetched, but Lawrence Lessig wrote a whole book about code is law. That was the book Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace, right? Where the law is created by the code. And if the code is an AI system, well, then the law is being created by an AI. Even things like monitoring chat areas, or even things like, your AI or analytic system as a counselor or consultant or psychologist to ease distress. These are all ways in which AIs are determining for us what is right and wrong, community standards, and so I think if we recognize what all of these applications of analytics are, we're in a much better position to start talking about the ethics of them, and not just talking about the ethics of them in the sense of what is right and what is wrong, but talking about the ethics of them in the sense of how do we as a society answer these questions? Because when we look at how we would program an AI to answer these questions, we're also looking at the question of how do we manage and organize ourselves as a society to answer these questions. And that's the other thing. We run down this list of different types of analytics. All of these things are things that humans have done. All of these things are problems that we actually solve for ourselves as people in society. Spam detection. When you're reading your email and you read an email and you say to yourself, that's spam, you're doing the same task that an AI would do. And the question isn't just simply, how would the AI do it? But the question is also, how do I do it? And and more generally, how does society as a whole determine what is spam, what is not spam? So I think understanding what these applications are helps us understand not just the ethics of analytics, but also our own ethics and our own approaches to these problems. And that overall was the purpose of this particular module. And that's my wrap up, but I'd love to give you guys the last words. So Sharita, any comments?
I like the way that you're building this, in that you're always bringing it back to a more social view of applications and technology versus, a very technical view.
Mm-hmm.
And that, that fits well with my thinking. So that's that, that would be one thing that I would say. There was something else there, but I lost it.
Okay. Well, we'll let Mark have his last word, and if you retrieve it, we'll give you a last word.
Yeah,
Mark?
I
know the feeling, believe me.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to agree with Sharita that the way this is emerging, through our co-construction and in a social manner, just demonstrates, connectivism. So I'm enjoying that part. And I did drop in the chat the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's Deontological Ethics. I didn't pronounce that correctly. They're my go-to, when I run across a concept that's slightly philosophical. They've got a great article on it. So that's
really good.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep reaching back to that to try to figure out what the heck you're talking about in deontonic analytics.
Yeah, it's deontological.
Deontological. There we go.
Yeah, and the subject is deontology, and it's precisely from that word that I got the category deontic analytics. It's the same root, same meaning, same purpose. So, and that'll be that particular branch of ethics will be part of our subject matter. I believe it's in module 5. All right, so we'll wrap up here. Watch for the newsletter coming out. Hopefully, I have it scheduled for being on time, and I've repaired my the pages weren't republishing properly, but I've repaired that. So watch for that, and then on Monday we'll get together again at noon and start talking about the issues. And again, there are many more issues than people think there are. We will have dozens and dozens and dozens of issues, and so we need to think about how to think about that.
Okay.
So,
That's good.
all right. So we'll see you then.